Okay, I just want to provide a little context for this video. I had asked Carla a particular question, um, but the conversation leading up to this point was not of any particular value. So I figured we would skip all that and get right to the question. It was a question about astrology, and I didn't word it very well, but Carla's answers, as always, was quite profound. So that's where we're going to start.
Okay, but I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to go to something more DK. So when you make a connection with, well, let me start out. He says everything is dark before you. He said, and it's the same way for masters. Whatever is up ahead is darkened. You cannot see it. Okay, and that's your protection. Because if you're expanding on anything, you're going into more light than you are. Mm. And so, just like if a couple of you might remember, when I had one of the first expansions of consciousness, early initiation, and I knew that I'd had it, and I held on to it, and I didn't want to let it go. You know, this is an ego thing. Oh my God, I got this energy. I don't want to let this go. Okay. Until it started burning the bones in my fingers and the pain. Okay. Because this was something that's where I learned my lesson, that you just let it go. Because you make the first contact, if you're making a real connection and expansion, and you are touching in just to get the connection with energy that's greater than you are. That's the beginning. So I learned, if from then on, whatever it was, if something came along, okay, I got it. I recognize I got the connection. Now I let it go. I'm not thinking about it anymore. I'm not trying to bring it back. I'm moving on. Mm. And so that's a biggie to understand. And then what will happen is, and now I'm going to go to where DK talks about the third initiation. And there is a reference in there because you connect with your soul at that point in time, and the consciousness of the two merge. Whatever you've built up to this point, whatever the soul has experienced in total to this point, and now it's in you are fully conscious of it. And so you have what they call continuity of consciousness after that. But in the third initiation is when the soul reaches out and it hits the spiritual atoms of the triad above it, the spiritual triad. So you've got the upper mental permanent atom. You've made a contact with the Buddhic permanent atom and the Atmic permanent atom, and you have built the Anakarana to connect with it. And then once you've done the first one and you're going to get some data, you'll do the second, and then you'll do the third. And he says, even no matter how tenuous the Anakarana is on the third one to the Atmic, which was your longest stretch, and the furthest one, he pointed out the key was it was made, because then you have created the conduit from where you are to where you want to go. And there'll be an exchange along that little Anakarana, if you will. That's your communication tube, or however you want to look at it. So that, and now let me throw in another thing he says, is that your brain is not capable of figuring, even knowing what's going on up there. Okay. So that, because it's not made to be that receiver. It can't do that. But there's things happening up there. Just know that is basically what he's saying. So then you will be building in, by having made that connection, to all those subplanes of the Buddhic plane, subplanes of the atmic plane, and you have completed initially from where the soul was on the mental plane, which is your third sublevel, and then you hit the second one and you've touched in with that mental permanent atom. So those are your 3 points, but the point being, you make the touch to make the initial contact, okay, and you're probably getting some, it depends which level it's on. You can still get a lot of, if you're on the Buddhic plane, because it is connected with the astral, okay. The intention was the astral plane is supposed to get clear and clean enough so that the Buddhic spiritual stuff that Christ demonstrated, etc., is supposed to be able to get down to the second. It's pretty messed up on the astral plane, so it's pretty hard to find all that there. And you'll see on your little chart, you should have a little line that comes from the Buddhic down to the astral. So when I've dealt with a lot of different groups and students and all this and all that, and they will sit more astrally oriented people and say, look, we can go straight to the Buddhic plane, and they're running it, and we don't have to go on the mental plane. That was always their agenda, and we can get this. Well, you're going to get some euphoric experiences because you're going to be lightening your load if you get a little connection to the Buddhic and its expression. But DK's answer is no, you do not go this route without going through the mental plane, connecting with the soul. He indicates there are tools there or pieces of information, I don't know exactly how he referred to it, that you need to have to go further. Okay. To make it to that Buddhic plane, experience that spiritual triad, and ultimately find your way till you get kicked out. Like Blavatsky says, there is no place for the weary pilgrim to stay in our system on this planet. Eventually, you're jettisoned out the door to wherever you choose to go. I don't know. Does this interest you? I can keep going on a little further.
Yeah, oh my God.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. So following, going on upward and merging with what Blavatsky said about no place to be, is evidently you get up after the fifth, because now you've exited the second duplicity. In other words, we've been living down here. Then if you experience the spiritual triad and get all that under your belt, and all those information, because you're just building in the information, and I'll go back later to how that is laid out for a guarantee that you can do it. But when you get done with that spiritual triad, is you've got the sixth initiation, because now you're separating from all of this and you're going to be up on the level below the monadic. Okay, is where you end up. The fifth, you leave, you just exit all that you've done. You already got it. And so now you're going to the next level. And what he says there is, okay, now they tell you, well, nice kind of, well, you got here, but you can't stay. So you got about 7 choices. They keep adding more of where you want to go. Where do you think you want to go? Okay. Every one of them leads off of this planet, and the majority of them, I think, other than Earth service, lead you out of this solar system, out somewhere else. Okay. So he then talks about, it's got to be a shocker. how in the world am I going to go out there? And they don't tell you anything. They'll give you the list, but they don't tell you what you're going to be doing here, there, or elsewhere. Okay, so you got to figure it out yourself. And then there's a long preparation after that from the 7th, 8th, and 9th initiations to be able to get out of here. And then you can only go at certain times when certain evidently cosmic alliances are aligned to be able to get you out. So that's the journey, but I'm going to go back now to what the question you asked, Donnie. You have to make on every step forward that contact with energy that you've not been in contact with yet, which means that it is more powerful or has more fire or is capable of burning you, or however you want to look at that. You make the initial touch in, and then you're jettisoned right back where you were. And frankly, you generally think you fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And they kicked you out. Okay. And you know, you can sit with that ideology for years before you really find out that, oh, okay, you know, but so you make that contact. Now, you said, then you'll figure out what you mean. That's his revelation. He says, you have the experience, you have the touch, you kind of get back here. Now it takes a little time, but for you to get the perspective and the realization or the revelation that comes with it, which will be some aspect of information of what that connection meant. But it takes some time because you've done oftentimes when you get a little further along, you've moved out of time to make those connections because time doesn't exist from the 4th level up. So you need to, it settles, it gets a concept of what that kind of was, what it would reveal. That's his revelation, but you get that afterwards. A certain amount of time. I mean, I don't, for other many people, it might be different time frames. But that's why he says a master never knows what's coming forward either. And that's his protection. So it doesn't matter who we are. You don't know until you have that experience, and it won't be very long the first time. And that's why I'm saying when I had that was the 2nd that I was talking about. So it was all down here. There wasn't anything up there, but there was more energy that would have been the higher astral at the time of a 2nd. So could still hold it, you know, and you've still got your soul, which is the ego. So, and that's what the, you know, Bailey talks about, is the soul and the ego being the same. So that ego is still in control at the 2nd, in as much as we're the little automaton down here that's been sent down to do the work. So that soul, it wants to keep good hold of us and run the show, so that it doesn't want you to get off track. You know, it doesn't want you to come down here and then go off on some wild tangent. Now we're 4 or 5 lifetimes. The soul's going to have to catch up just for the boo-boo you made now. So that ego, which when you're young and maybe teenagers, I don't know how they act these days. You know, well, if you follow that, you're considered selfish, and or it's just your ego driving it. Yeah, it's that soul, if he's got a little bit of control of you, wants you to go this way or that way, and wants to make sure you stay on focus. And that's really what the ego is about. Well, after the 3rd, you don't have that as a driver. You've made a union with it, and the goal, you know, the soul, like he says, is the initiate, and that soul is trapped until you do the job of getting up to and having the 3rd initiation. After that, you're operating as one unit, and you're not, that ego doesn't exist there. It doesn't have to anymore. You know, that the job has been done. The soul and what's in there has been freed to go forward. So you won't be obstructing that. Again, you've already made the connections. If you've done that third, you've already got the touch-ins with the anakarana to those three, the triad. And so it's guaranteed you're going forward. Let's assume you hold your body this time. If not, you would come back, recapitulate to that point. Because he says actually at the third, you can now come and go as you want. You are not limited, because the fourth initiation is the destruction of the causal body. And why is it called that? Because that is the encasement with the soul, and that was the cause of how you got here. Until you've done the third, then that's game over. You're up on the triad. You can go back and forth at will. He says, but you don't really know it right after the third initiation. You're not aware of what you can do. And you're in the infancies of that, if you will, in as much as it's going to take time for all of that information, awareness, energy that's on the sub-level of the Buddhic and the Atmic planes to get here, because you are in time. And you won't know it's happening because the brain won't be able to record it, according to DK. Is that a beginning of answer to your question?
No, it's interesting that the brain can't record it, but so we just, so then what? Just don't worry about it.
That's right.
Just be.
Uh-huh.
Stop.
Because it's the process of becoming.
But information does come through.
When you get to a certain point, he's saying you will not know anymore what's going on up there. Just like he indicates the masters when they're up in the ashramic levels, and what their ashram is trying to do, whichever level we're talking about, or ray structure, is finding out what that energy says, learning how to read the energy up there, becoming that consciousness and that awareness coming to it. But this brain, he indicates, is not capable of picking up that as it is happening.
What do we experience down here in as that's happening? Is there any like translation? Is there any state or
Well, on the astral, you hit the high points, you're going to be euphoric about the glory of God, so to speak. I'm just trying to find a terminology. Everybody's going to have a little different, but you're going to hit those high points of glory. That's why people who are predominantly astral composite believe they can go straight to the Buddhic, because they may well get a touch in.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then they have this great high euphoric feeling happening, and they think they're up there already. Okay. And that's why they're saying, oh, well, I can go straight to God because I don't need to go on the mental plane. I don't need to have, make that connection. But that's not the case. And it's not the case because the whole objective is releasing that soul. You got to do that at the third. It has to physically be done. It's on the mental plane. And understand also that we are moving up into the mental realm, and he will continually tell you that, or any of these other books for that matter, it is your thought on the mental plane that does the work. That is the key. And so if I jump to, okay, we're done with the age of Pisces. We're now moving into the age of Aquarius. Age of Aquarius is mental. It is what we, science is up there. And basically, because there was such a dichotomy between the Piscean age and an aversion to science or whatever was on the mental plane and how it functions, it probably still looks like an enemy. It's not. Okay. The design of the mental plane is what science is exposing and explaining to us as they learn what it is and how it functions. And so, and as you well know that, or I guess we learned some of it with Einstein and then coming in with quantum mechanics, so on and so forth, there has to be an observer. And so if you want to know what's going on, whatever your aspect of equation is, there has to be an observer, and then you measure from the relation of the observer what you were looking for. That's a real short version. I'm sure that they would go bonkers over that, but you are the observer. It is your thought that directs all of this. So when you start seeing, as you're reading more and more, that it is thought, they really mean it is thought. You need to think it. So now let's go back to the building in. Okay. You are building in on the mental plane all of the portions of how and what you need to get to that third sublevel of the mental plane, to have that, what is considered the first initiation as far as the masters are. And it's, I know why now that it is because whatever you had on the astral plane just meant that for you to take the initiation, now we'll go back to Annie Besant for a minute, you have to have all of those vibrations on that plane and be able to match them. Once you've heard them, you've got it, so you can match. And now we're going to the duality of this system, second solar system. I mean, I'm really bouncing around here. Union of spirit and matter. That's what you need every time, because what there has to be a duality in this system. It's second ray, union of spirit and matter. And when they come together, then you have the vibration, you have the pattern, and you move to the next, so on and so forth. The soul doesn't want anything to do with you consciously until you have the body that all works together. In other words, your physical, your mental, and your emotional has to work as one unit. Integrated personality is what they call it. So if you're because then you won't lose focus. The soul doesn't want to make that contact prior to that, because if you're missing one of those vibrations on those lower levels, and that gets sounded somewhere in your world, you have to go to it to fill it in, which means that where you had done the first initiation, done the second, and you've now gotten up to there, you might be drawn back to the second sub level of the emotional, because you've got to match that vibration. You were missing it. And the soul can't handle that. It can't take that chance because it can really throw off the growth and development. Because now you're down there with more energy and going gaga. I'm using the astral plane for gaga. Okay. And then you got to work your way all the way back up, because you would have put some other things out of sync to get there, is what your reading is going to tell you, is that you're going to have more energy. It's going to be a higher vibration. And now you've just dropped yourself down here and probably going to bounce all over the place and throw everything off. So that's the key to having, and that's why you need all those vibrations. Because what will happen, I don't care where you are in your growth and development, you will resonate to whatever is going on. Because if you were becoming great spiritual beings, okay, and you got some kids, well, pretty soon, if you were growing up to this level, and what they used to think when it started in the 60s was you got nirvana and then you were always in nirvana forever from then on. Well, it don't work that way. And if you have children and you're taking this journey and now you're moving up, if you can't resonate back to them, you wouldn't be able to talk to them and communicate with them. You would have moved out of their range and it was permanent, but it doesn't work that way. In other words, I guess I could go back to using the example of Christ. If he was that ascended, if he was that advanced, and as you advanced, you never came back down, he wouldn't be able to communicate with anybody and do anything. But it doesn't work that way. We resonate the totality of the energy we are at whatever level, and we can play it up and down as things sound. You can relate to them, and and like I said, if not, then you wouldn't even be able to communicate.